Glynn Washington. This is one of those moments in my life where I feel like I'm living in a dream world. And I know you work in the arts, so I'm sure you've had those moments many, many times, and as have I. But I am just meeting you for the first time in person. And I'm just, or on Zoom, I should say, live. And I'm just like blown away that God has gotten me to this moment. So I just want to acknowledge that. I'm very grateful to be in your presence live. Um, I've been listening to your podcast. It was the first it was really a radio show, let's be honest, NPR, PRX. And for me, it was my first podcast that I listened to. So I'm sort of having a fangirl moment. So forgive me. You just blow me away every time you open your mouth. And it's not just because I've been doing voiceover since I was a little kid. It's not just the way you say things, it's the substance of what you say, sir. And I'm just very acknowledging your light right now. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I don't know what to say now. We should close off on that. That sounds great. And thank you very much and good night. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I was thinking about what specifically about you and this moment is so inspiring to me. And I think I figured it out. I was praying on it. And when my rabbi dared me to start a podcast, the first thing I thought of was forgiveness. And then I started doing it and, you trial and error. And today it occurred to me that Snap Judgment, which is, if you haven't heard his podcast yet, run to your phone, shut this off and go listen. You will be a changed person when you start listening. I believe Snap Judgment really is about prejudging others. And I think at its core, it's about forgiveness. So please don't sue me. I haven't made any money on my podcast anyway, but don't sue me for starting my podcast about forgiveness, because I think your show actually affected what I wanted to make my podcast about. How did this all begin for you? I mean, I saw the behind the scenes of how Snap Judgment started. I'm so glad you guys made that. Your story is amazing. You don't have to go through that because whoever's a huge fan of yours probably already saw it or will go look it up. But I want to know for you, on your growing up as a little boy, what made you look beyond what you saw?
Interesting question. I grew up in the middle of a crazy cult. A lot of people who I tell stories about this all the time, but we thought that the world was about to end at the time in the late 80s, and was told that I would never get to grow up, that I would never reach adulthood, that I would never marry, that there would be a return of Jesus before any of that stuff happened. And so, and that meant that everything was very, very immediate. It focuses you on the right now. If you don't get right this moment, there's gonna be trouble. And also, it was a world that we saw that any sort of event, I think it's happening in a lot of evangelical circles right now, but people say if you see an event in the world, you go to the Bible and you match things up. And we thought we were living in the end times, in the book of Revelation. At the time, the reunification, I'm using their terminology, but the unification of Europe was a big portentous sign of the end of days. The fall of the Berlin Wall, prophesied in the Bible. Israel itself, the modern founding. As a side note, I was looking at the newspaper somewhere, and a group of people decided to try to blow up the Dome of the Rock near Jerusalem to hasten the end of days. And I was like, that sounds suspicious. Sounds suspiciously like my people. And I looked it up. It was offshoot of the group I grew up in. That's what they were up to. But
are you allowed to say? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but are you allowed to say the name of the group? Would you rather not?
No, it was called the Worldwide Church of God. Well, it was everywhere because it was worldwide, but it was based, like all good cults are based, in California. Um, when you grow up in something like that and then realize that it's all a bunch of stuff and nonsense, that these big pillars of what you consider to be reality are made of sand, then it gives you a perspective to maybe look at everything else at a different, with a different vantage point as well. I hope I'm answering your question, but it was one of those things when you realize that, nah, I don't think Jesus is going to come next week. Actually, I think I've been a part of a big collective community lie, and trying to get out of that was a long-term process mentally. It's community, it's belief, it's language, it's everything. It's when you say all of that stuff, all that whole thing that I came from, I want to rid myself of it. Now, that's impossible, but it you do get to go back and pick and choose a lot of what do you want to keep.
Now, were both of your parents engrossed? And I'm assuming you didn't wake up and say, "Hey, bye, mom and dad, I'm going to this cult." Like, who was the
Oh,
one?
no. I was born into it, essentially. Yeah, I didn't make an affirmative choice to be in this organization.
Yeah, your spirit doesn't seem culty to me. Like, in all
I'm
the
against.
work.
Yeah. The one thing I tell the kids these days is don't grow up in a cult.
Yeah. It's funny. It's ironic funny. And so how did you unravel from the people that I'm assuming you loved, because every boy loves his mom and dad, even when they hurt, even when they hurt us? So how did you get past that?
You know, it's still ongoing. A lot of the people who I grew up with that organization, they are people I still love. Parents, of course, I love my parents. I think that age is such a great teacher that, you know, I have my own kids I can make completely different mistakes with. I guess it's kind of one of those things where you just you ease into a type of forgiveness and just assume, you know what, I think they're doing the best they could with what they have. We made some very, very different choices. I think that for me, it's not healthy, useful, or even reality to assume an ill will from those people that were closest to me. Now, the organization, criminals would, this is before the new masters of the universe, as far as that is concerned. This is back in the day. And but he flew on his private plane the way that Jesus would want, the way that and we had some kind of reflect. That was us.
So I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to make sure that we don't skip over this. You said stuff and nonsense, which, by the way, is one of my favorite lines from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Stuff and nonsense. It's like one of Veruca Salt's dads. If you grew up in the 80s, you know that line. Every line of that movie is gold. When you say that, I know, because I feel like I know you from your personal stories that you've shared so beautifully. So it's really not fair. Like, I feel like I know you better than you know me. But although my rabbi says you can get to know somebody in a moment, you just see them because you see their essence. But anyway, I know that you get that so much of this life is the unseen. And some would say that what I believe, if I could put myself in the same camp as you, those of us who are pioneering to try to change the world for the good, some would say that's stuff and nonsense, right? So how do you, Glynn Washington, I didn't think we were going to get this deep so quickly, but how do you teach your own children or your own students what the difference between stuff and nonsense that's good, what to have faith in that is the unseen?
It's really hard. And I think I've basically, they've reversed the equation because they've taught me. One of the things, like, I was just telling a story about my son, who is still, angry is not the right word, but disappointed in me because he says, Dad, eating meat is wrong. And I was like, why? And I tried to argue it for a while. I could over argue when he was a little kid. I could give him some good arguments, but then he got older and his arguments start making more sense than mine did. And my real argument is, but yes, but it's tasty. That's the basis of my argument. And that's not a very good argument. And he's let me have it. And now the fact that him coming to that realization, and that I've reduced my meat consumption by probably 95% is not good enough. It's not good enough. Dad, it's wrong. It's a wrong thing to do. And I'm like, yeah, but there's lots of things that are wrong in this world, and you got to pick and choose. And I love the binary aspect and the burn and the light in him, that sense of just, I don't care what someone else says about this. I don't care if I'm going to be a weirdo, but I'm not going to do this. And having that fire, I mean, he's done that since he was 9, 10 years old. You think it's going to be a phase, and it's not. I've learned from that sense of, I don't care about ramifications, repercussions, but I'm just not going to do this. The only thing I can really try to teach is, which I think is the basis of morality, is empathy. We live in Oakland, in California. And like outside of my house, within 100 feet, there's people living on the street. The way that we've dealt with our homeless situation in the United States is criminal. It's like Calcutta. All the houses on the street are in excess of $1 million, but there's people living on the sidewalk in front of them. One of the things I can't fix it. I don't know what to do. I try to look people in the eye when I see them. People say, well, don't give money, give services or something like that. And yeah, I understand people saying it and that's nature, but when I'm with my kid and my kid's there and someone says, do you have $1? It's not even, to some degree, and that's selfish, really, really selfish. To some degree, it's not even about the homeless person. It's about wanting to ensure that my child sees that as a person. $5 might not help them directly, but you don't walk over that. You don't get inured to that. It's not ever going to be right. And even if you can't fix it, you have to look it dead in the eye. But if you want to go to sacred text, the biggest line that I can pull from any is, if not for the grace of God, there go I. That is the base. I mean, that's what I want to teach them more than anything. What you do with that, you're going to go in different directions. Everyone has to find a thing that they do, that their light is going to be very, very different than mine. I gotta think that's the heart of any of it.
Yeah, beautiful. So after all of this time that you've been listening and living these forgiveness stories, I'm going to call them forgiveness stories, even though I know they're about not making a judgment right away. Snap Judgment. Listen to it if you haven't already. And even if you have, listen again. After living through all these stories, interviewing so many people, what is it like? Have you counted? Do you know how many thousands it is yet?
I don't. I don't.
What have you learned about the practice of forgiveness?
I mean, I can't say anything profound about this. I know that for forgiveness, I tell a lot of personal stories. And the personal stories that when you tell from a narrative perspective, no one wants to hear the story about how you saved the day and made all the right decisions. The stories that you tell are about the mistakes and the things that you wish you could have done better, and those times where you didn't quite live up to your conception of yourself. And um, and being able to forgive yourself oftentimes is the biggest thing ever.
Yeah.
And it's a lesson I know I'm still trying to learn. Like being able to extend that same, it's all well and good to extend the grace to someone who has offended you, but carrying, that's all shame is simply not extending that grace back to you. And this is such an interesting exercise, because if you go and speak to a person, almost any person, and say, "What's your story?" That story will be a story of trauma, be a story of hurt and pain. Especially like what is, and that they'll carry, that's a story you care about yourself, carry, and you tell about yourself, and that trauma, that it's even higher for women, right? That stories of trauma. What if you go and you see, you take a step back and you're a different entity, and you look at that person who is you in that pain? What would you give to that person? Would you condemn them, or would you give them a hug, some love? What would you do? And I think if it was not you, in that situation, most of us would want to embrace that person. Tell that person it's going to be okay. Tell that person that your story doesn't end in this closet, or in this situation, or in this relationship. It ends over here, and you're going to be a better person. And I know that one of the stories, she said it so beautifully. She she's talking to herself as a little girl who is crying, whose mother has called her ugly, and whose hair is falling out, and she says as an adult to herself, "You have always been beautiful. You've been beautiful. You," and she's speaking to herself, but she's speaking to that little girl. That, when you talk about forgiveness, you for, and if, and as soon as you do that and you accept that from yourself, you're able to more fully give it to others. It's so important to embrace that aspect of you, to forgive you, and to see you. You know, we don't extend that grace to ourselves.
Yeah, it's kind of like what you said before when I asked you about your parents. You're like, well, I love them, and it's not even a question of forgiving them. I heard recently from my sister, who's also a very powerful soul, we're all just a hologram of each other. So whatever pain we just went through with someone else, whatever we see them as, it's we put it on ourselves. So, that's also about the snap. It's like you're going to carry that story with you wherever you go if you don't let it go. And every time you carry a new story of unforgiveness or judgment towards someone else, guess what? You are that judgment. And then you keep carrying all this stuff. And it's like, do you want to Marie Kondo your life and let go so you can have new cool blessings? Or do you want to just keep holding? And it's really not fair, because I think the way God created us is to protect and to have that fight or flight, so we know how to, right? Especially with, I find that the male genes are very protective too, or that masculine energy is very like, come here, let me, and I actually enjoy that about masculine energy. And I think it's so necessary, and we all have it within us as well. But it's such it's kind of like we got set up, are you going to keep choosing fear and holding on to stories and protecting, or are you going to challenge yourself that when Glynn Washington asks you, what's your story? You say, I've had so many blessings in my life. Let me take you through. Like, which are you going to carry more of? And it's like you said, you have to forgive yourself. And then once you do that and you let go of the shame of whatever it was that happened to you, once you see it as happening for you, whatever it was your gift. Anything that happened outside of yourself was a gift. Whether you don't see it yet, you will if you look for it, right? And on that tip, one of the things I love about your work is that whether it's a storytelling workshop or actually Snap Judgment, I notice that you have this wonderful way, and your company has a way of spinning stories that could be otherwise traumatic into art. You know, the sound engineering alone is just, you guys, if you haven't heard this, you have to go and listen. It's just so fun. It's so delicious to listen to. And you feel like you're in a movie. Sometimes I started listening to your podcast because I would teach Hebrew school out of my car. That's how I made money as an actor and and a singer and a producer in LA and a writer. I that was my day job. It still sort of is. I was working Jewish education in all different facets of it. And I write curriculum, and I would, throw the books and the art supplies in my back trunk. And then I just start driving around, and you know how California is. It's like, it could take you an hour to get from Santa Monica to the city of LA. Sometimes an hour and a half. I heard 2 episodes, and I'd have to sometimes pull over because I was so ensconced in the story. What have you learned in all these years of doing it about turning trauma into beautiful art?
I would advise anybody and everybody to, if they can, work with geniuses, because they end up doing a lot of different things to make you sound good. We have this amazing sound team, Pat Mesiti-Miller and Renzo Gorio. The amount of music that these guys have to create over the course of a year to score every single episode that we do. I mean, the team here, we're producing about 70 different episodes between Spooked and Snap Judgment and other things. How they do it and score all this stuff is it's really stunning and so fortunate. But I think a lot of creators, they ask writers or radio producers or whatever it may be, when you're started, how do you do that? How do you get, how do you make something? And I had one of the things that was so lucky for me is that I had a creative part. We're doing a lot of different things. We're throwing various darts at the boards, from screenplays and music and all kinds of different things. But I had a partner who understood what I was trying to do. He understood where I was going, even if I didn't get there. And that's so hard, so important, to find a person who can be genuinely critical, but whose sort of voice you can accept, whose criticism you can accept. Most people, if you write a story, you give it to your spouse, give it to your boyfriend, give it to your mom, give it to those people close to you. And those people will do the very best they can. They'll tell you what they think because they love you or whatever, but they may not be the target audience for what you're trying to create. They might not understand what it is you're trying to do. I laugh about this, but it's true. If I write a story right now and I give it to my mother and I say, Mom, what do you think? And she'll read it and she'll say, well, this story needs more Jesus in it. Now, it's probably, that's where she's coming from. And she's not trying to hurt me. She's just trying to say, if I was going to do this, I'd have more Jesus in it. And so the thing is to try and find a person that, if that's what you want, find a person that will say that to you. But if it's not, find a person that actually gets where you're coming from and can give you real criticism. What's great now that we're in the internet age is that person doesn't have to live next door to you are in the same community. You can try and find people who can be your sort of creative partner, that could be anywhere. But finding them is really important. Having someone to bounce stuff off of it ends up being really, really critical, I think, to a lot of people's development as an artist.
You have like this endless well of stories. Every time I hear an introduction to your show, I'm like, and of course you always start with the okay, so, which is like my favorite. Every time I heard you, I was like, wait, are we in the middle of this? It's just such a brilliant opening. How do you keep digging? Where do these stories come? Or do you ever get to a place where you're like, okay, this episode's going to be about religious values. I'm done. I already told all those stories. Like, do you ever get to that? Do you get a little nervous about it? Like, tell me how you do that.
I look at a blank computer screen the way everyone else does, with complete and abject horror, for sure. It's hard sometimes. One of the biggest lies that anyone ever told the art community is that art is dependent upon a muse or an inspiration. This is all ass power, and which means you sit your ass down until it's done. I've had some real crazy stories in my life, and I've tried to lean forward into some stories. Like, yeah, I've got a story where I was running from the Yakuza gangsters and hiding in a ditch with the gun blazing over me, that type of stuff. I actually truly have a few of those. We've done hundreds of episodes. I don't have 100 of those. I got a few, we came out guns blazing with those big stories and all that kind of stuff, and people like them. But it's been interesting to me that as we go on, one of the champion storytellers on our show, Josh Healy, was talking one day, and basically the bet was, can you tell a meaningful, impactful story about crossing the street? And he told a story, and the fact pattern was, I take my nephew to the water park and he goes down the water slide. That is the fact pattern. That's what happened in the story. But the telling was such that it ended up being maybe one of my favorite stories ever told on Snap Judgment. And that's just it. Thankfully, you utilized all of my crazy fact patterns. It's not even about them anymore. It's about those small moments. It's about those pedestrian moments. But I look back since we started, and oh my gosh, I've become a better writer. It's taken a long time. I've taken the hard-headed way of this, but yeah, the writing has become more important than the fact pattern of a story.
And I like how you used the word pedestrian when you were talking about crossing the street. What is your biggest forgiveness story? You knew this was coming. I mean, that's what the show is. So, and I know people who already know you really look up to you, and I know you've had a bunch on your show that you've already told. But for someone who maybe, doesn't want the bells and whistles and the cool background music, because we don't have that here. What is it? When I say that to you right now, I know you've probably let go of a lot because through the art, you've been able to probably release it cathartically. But if I asked you right now, what's your biggest forgiveness story? What would you say today?
There's a man who's now a friend. He used to be my boss. I am a hard friend sometimes, a hard partner, and the people closest to me, I'm blessed that I have people who we've just maintained contact and friendship over decades, and I feel grateful to that, and I know that it's not possible to have those type of relationships without them giving me a lot, extending me forgiveness again and again and again.
Wait, I have to cut you off. I asked you this, and what most of my guests, actually all of them up until now, when they hear the words, what's your biggest forgiveness story? They immediately assume that I am asking them, who did you forgive? Who was your biggest forgive? And it's so interesting that you, of all people, are the first person to say, who forgave me the most? It's like you have such a selfless way about you. I don't know if you caught that. My listeners are like, why is he talking about that? That's amazing. Okay, keep going. Sorry to cut you off.
Well, I've been fortunate, and I'll just tell you, there's so many of these, and I want to, without, revealing some confidences, there was just a story I told a little while ago on Snap. Before starting Snap Judgment, I used to be a nonprofit advocate in San Francisco. And there's San Francisco's bunch of social services for homeless, for battered women, for kids services. I was an advocate for all these groups, and who were finally trying to organize themselves together and get together and go to City Hall and fight for the social services they're delivering. And for the first time ever, we'd organized bunch of people to get together, and we're going to put a ballot measure together in San Francisco to help get some funding for these organizations. And it was because these organizations were traditionally at war with each other because everyone's fighting for this little scrap of funding. We actually gathered everybody together, and there's the business lobbyists go in and out of the City Hall, no problem. But finally, the nonprofit people were putting it together, and they had asked me to spearhead this because I had worked in City Hall, and I felt really good about this, and we got all of these people together. We got the signatures. We got these various organized groups together, and I, it's a stickler. I've been in City Hall for a long time, so I know. We had gotten it all together, and I'm not gonna wait until the deadline of 5 p.m. until the city closes. I got up this morning. I had a smile on my face. I went and had a big brunch, a big breakfast, because we had done it. We've done all the things. I had everything. I double checked it all night long, had everything ready to go. And I went to City Hall, hey, past the business lobbyists, get up out the way. Yeah, we players now. We're players. And I go to the registry where I'm going to turn in all these signatures, and the woman's locking the door. And I said, "Oh, you're going to lunch? I'll be back. I'll wait for you." No. The deadline is 12:30. Well, it's 12:32. No, I'm sorry. That's just the way it goes. We have to have that mark. And she says, "Excuse me." I said, no. I have it right here. No. You missed it. You missed the deadline. And she walks away. I'm the person who messed up all of this organization for a lot of different people. It was on me because I didn't understand that. No, they close at 12:30, not the regular 5 o'clock deadline. And I was in a fetal position almost. And my then boss is like, "You know what? Sometimes these things happen. Learn from it." And this is a firing offense. This is when you get out the door. This is when you messed up so much. You this, but that's not what he did. He was just like, "You know what? You did the best you could." It was so gracious and so kind at a time when I can't really tell this story without feeling that same those knife in my own heart, and he extended grace to me. And I think that forgiveness, it makes me, when I think about that, it makes me want to be a better person, want me to be more generous to other people, because I can get really, where is it? We got to get it done. We got deadlines. What? You never mess anything up? Let's roll tape. the band's name is Bruce Fisher. Can you be Bruce Fisher? Can you Bruce Fisher this other person who just messed up whatever you were looking for? That's my forgiveness story. That's a forgiveness stories that come to mind.
And I love that it was about someone forgiving you. This is a first on See One Beautiful Soul. What have you learned about humanity as a whole by hearing all of these stories and also editing your own? Because, you know, it's one thing to tell your story, but then to actually look at it for production value and be like, oh, what is the story really about? Like for me, I'll tell you my very favorite Snap Judgment, probably because I'm Jewish, but you know, I do know a thing or two about the KKK and the ADL, and the ADL starting because of the KKK. That story of the rabbi who got in his car with his wife and went to the KKK member's home and didn't give up until that guy had a meeting, and just the whole turn of events. I don't want to say the ending because it's so worth listening to the whole thing. If you haven't heard it yet, the episode, I'll put it in the show notes. But that episode, man, I've shared that with so many classes. I shared it this morning on my walk with a friend. Another question I always ask everybody, so maybe it'll be more to the point because we've kind of already covered it a little bit, but what would you tell your children and future generations about humanity as a whole based on all the stories you've heard about human suffering, kindness, not judging? Like, what would be that one takeaway if you could tell everybody, please do this, and then we won't have to do these stories because they won't exist? What would be that thing?
I think it's story itself. The closest thing that we have to telepathy, to wearing someone else's skin, to seeing through someone else's eyes, is actually listening to their story. And I can't emphasize, if we can't imagine ourselves in someone else's shoes, I think we're doomed. And what should you do? What can you do? What has this thing taught me is that the spectrum of the human experience is more broad and varied than you could possibly imagine. People's perspectives, you think you have a model of how the world works. I guarantee you that someone else's situation, but understanding it a little bit, can expand that model, change that model. You see people have political arguments all the time, and they put their fist up and they want to fight or whatever. But when you listen to someone's story, you actually, because maybe the dukes are down to some extent, that's when you actually change a mind. And it happens all the time. No one has ever watched a political show and seen anyone ever change their mind. It happens all the time, though, when you hear someone's story, when you actually get into where that person's coming from. You think about that there is a story behind someone, in the people that you despise, the people that you hate. We say this line, and but it's actually true that it's very, very hard to hate someone if you know their story. And it is. If you get where they're coming from, even the most hateful person, there's a reason why they're responding that way. And
there's a context.
There's a context. And I'm not saying they're right. I'm not saying they should be doing what they're doing. I'm saying that they have a story that puts them there. The assumption that another person is another you, and they should be making the same decisions that you are making, is a fallacy of the highest order. People are carrying some of the most horrific. A normal looking person who looks just like anybody else may be coming from a legacy of abuse you cannot imagine. They be coming from a legacy of sorrow or hurt or pain or whatever it may be, and they're just barely holding on right now. But know it. But if you did know it, if you understood where they were coming from, there'd be nothing to do but, again, try to give that person an embrace. And that's not rare. They're everywhere. Everywhere you go, you look at this person, and the stories will floor you if you knew them. I'm so thankful that sometimes I do get to know them.
Yeah. And because you have courage and you didn't give up on your dream of getting some stories out there, now, God willing, millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people have heard some of those stories too. What's next for you?
I'm writing a fictional podcast right now. I'm writing a book. We've got some great new stuff coming from Snap Judgment. When we first started Snap Judgment, I imagined that because we're so serious about sound, we're so serious about the music and the Foley and everything like that, that I thought the best place to hear this show would be on a sound stage with a glass of port somewhere we could really get it. But since then, there has been the rise of Headphone Nation, where people do this everywhere to give themselves their own little protection, their own little sound cocoon. And this is fairly recent, but it's such a gift to someone like me who, oh, you're gonna really get into my world now? That I'm gonna throw every single trick of the acoustic sound box to really take people for a cinematic ride. And we do have a playland now that we really couldn't have conceived of even a few years ago.
So it's like VR for the ears or something?
I think it's cinema of sound, movies of the mind. I know that myself. I read a lot of. I used to read a lot of books. Now I listen to. I probably listen to more books than anyone I know, and I can do that walking around the lake, going for a hike. My apartment would never be clean if I couldn't like listen to an audio book, or when I'm doing it, or when I'm loading the dishwasher. I don't have to, I can't remember the last time I sat down and watched a TV show. I can't remember, but I do these stories through audio. I can do my thing and live my life and still be immersed in this in these various worlds. It's wonderful.
Well, thanks for supporting me, because I've done a lot of audiobooks, including my own, which is And Then One Day the World Coughed by Barbara Hall. I wrote it during COVID about the blessings of COVID and how a lot of people went home, and people in old age homes were finally visited, because at one point they couldn't. It was like against the law to visit them, and some of them actually died because no one visited them. But you're not going to like this. The very last page, spoiler alert, is about noise canceling headphones. And so my challenge to you as an audio person, an audio artist like myself, is how can we take these stories and bring them more to life, like A Night at the Moth, sitting down and listening in person, real life. I know COVID is real, and we are still under certain restrictions in some places for good reason. I work with kids every day, and I want to try to get them out of the ear pods so that they can do more empathetic, in-person eye pheromones, hanging out, hugs. Remember hugs? According to Fauci, we're not supposed to hug anymore. Oh, that's so sad. And I don't blame him for saying it. I've always been a germaphobe, neurotic Ashkenazi Jew right here. That's how we got out of the bubonic plague. Look it up. It wasn't because of witchcraft. We actually just washed our hands. But at the same time, if we're not going to hug, we're going to die. What do you think a possible solution is? And I know this is hard because I'm not trying to kill your business. There is a time and a place for listening, but how do we get off the headphones?
Oh, I again, like you said, there's a time and place. What I miss more than anything is our Snap Judgment live show. Being able to go on stage and being able to have people in an audience. I expect to get back out next year. Can't wait to do so. I don't think there's an either or situation here. I think that
Yeah, me too.
I talk to students as well, and they're like, how should I do this? How should I do that? It's like, look, the stuff that you guys are going to be able, the types of media you have access to, I couldn't even imagine. Design, print, have delivered a comic book within a week is something that little me would not have been able to even conceive of. I think there's a podcast that we featured a little while ago from the UK called This is George's Podcast. The melding of poetry and music and story. It just, every time you think, okay, we've reached a pinnacle, someone throws down a gauntlet in a different way. Comic book too that I grew up with, author that I've loved forever, Neil Gaiman. He did the Sandman series of comic books. That just came out as an audiobook, probably the most lush audio production, narrative production of all time. And it's just gorgeous. It's like you feel like you're stepping into another reality putting on these headphones. The different actors and hundreds of musicians make this thing work. We didn't know that that was a thing. We're just getting started.
I love that you get that stories are not just about blood and guts and shock value or political agenda. I think that's also very heroic of your podcast, that I don't feel that there's an agenda when I listen to it, and it's so rare to tell stories without that. And I just want to end with this. There was a rabbi that I had on recently last summer. He was one of the last episodes of the first season. His name is Rav Hanan Schlesinger. He's so interesting. He's like a really short guy, super powerful, lives in the gush of Israel. So he would be called a quote unquote settler. And one day he decided, he felt this calling to go about 500 yards from where he lives and go visit a Palestinian camp of where people were living. And his wife was like, "What are you doing? You need to bring a gun." And he's like, "No, I'm just going to go, and I want to just see what happens." And he was very shocked to find a circle of Israelis and Palestinians sitting in a circle. He had been invited by a fellow Israeli. And that's how his organization New Roots began, where all they do is sit around in a circle and tell stories of trauma, of beauty, of heroic moments and joy and pain. And little by little, or in Hebrew we'd say layat, layat, slowly, slowly, they're changing Israel. I believe in his work so much. And all it is what you just said. It is storytelling without any production. It's just like, and it's painful, and it's hard for people of either side to sit and listen when, things happen, accidents, vicious things, terrorism, the IDF, doing the wrong thing, whatever it is. And yet, by sitting and listening and hearing the story that someone with a hijab comes with, or with an IDF, gun, or some with payas and a kippah comes with, you take that snap judgment and you put it on the side, and you're just an audience, and you're listening to the context of this person. So I love that. I love that is your message to the younger generations to come, that, story itself, and asking people what their story is instead of headlines and news. Anything that you want to, I know you said before you have nothing to promote, and I really admire that, but if there's anything specifically you'd love for people to listen to, even if it's not your own work, or how to get in touch with you, all the things we want to hear.
No, definitely check out Snap Judgment. We have a spin-off podcast called Spooked. It's a season of Spooked right now. I think it's really an interesting, cool show to hear people talk about stuff that, whether you believe in their supernatural experiences or not, you don't think they're lying to you. And it's just a lot of fun. Check them out. I think I love storytelling. I love the people. I love all the snappers around the land, around the world, I'm grateful to everyone who's made it so that we can tell these stories.
Well, I want to say thank you again for all your time. So very generous of you. You've got a beautiful family to attend to. And, you know, the fact that you took a moment to share your beautiful soul with me and inspire other people to see more of a beautiful soul means a lot. And I want to wish you a great weekend. And thanks again for coming on.
Have a great weekend. Thank you so much for having me.